All right, welcome back to Patient Win Insider. I'm Nick Moen, and today I'm joined by Stephanie Lee, a multi-site operations leader supporting numerous dental practices with Southeast Dental Partners. Stephanie brings a unique perspective from inside the engine room, coaching practice managers, optimizing systems, and navigating the daily realities of growth, staffing, and patient care. Today, we're diving into what it really takes to lead operational change at scale in the current climate. Thanks for joining today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Nick.
Well, I guess just to start off, I'm curious if you could wave a magic wand and fix one challenge across all the practices tomorrow that you're working with, what would it be?
Honestly, I think it would be creating, consistency in execution. I think with Southeast, we have great systems and training, but getting every team to kind of adopt best practices the same way is tough. If we could ensure the same outcome, from the front to the back within each practice, there would definitely be more consistency.
Okay. And what about long-term growth? I mean, obviously it's nice to have an opportunity to change everything at once, but what does it really take to settle into long-term growth with these practices?
I definitely think, success looks different, in different areas, different offices. But I think overall, just being able to develop teams in a way where we're retaining the talent, growing, and, of course, providing the best patient care.
Definitely. And your role, or you mentioned your role is really a lot like a internal consultant or coach. So what kind of conversations are you having most often with other people in the practice and the managers?
Yeah, I mean, most of our conversations are about people, how to coach their teams, holding their staff accountable, and develop, a strong culture within each practice. We also talk a lot about leading and essentially being their team's biggest cheerleader, I think is huge. Obviously, we can produce all we can, but if you're not being a great leader and, the morale is not great in each practice, then that can also make a practice fail.
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, you can't be too bossy, right? I mean, you have to really like
Yeah.
give autonomy and guide towards results. How do you strike a balance of, maintaining, respectful conversations with the teams?
Yeah. I mean, definitely like kind of like previously mentioned, we try to lead with coaching and not micromanagement. Especially with this company, each practice has its unique dynamics. So we give the practice managers room to lead, but we're very clear on expectations. Obviously, KPIs are huge. And we have obviously those non negotiables. We're more here as a resource. I've mentioned to you, I feel like I'm more of their coach and a consultant. But we also really try to empower them to make decisions and take ownership of the results.
Sure. And what sort of KPIs are you monitoring? Like, how do you know if there's like a warning sign coming in that something's not going well?
Yeah, some of the ones, the top KPIs that we really look for are, hygiene reappointment rate. Are we retaining those hygiene patients that are coming in for recalls and things? New patient numbers. Is there something that we need to modify within marketing? Production obviously is huge. Our AR, we take pride. I think Southeast is probably one of the best companies that I've worked for that we really keep a close pulse on our AR, which meaning, outstanding insurance, patient AR, things like that.
So patient retention obviously matters a lot, but when you're working with the teams, what is the hardest part about hiring and then retaining the teams that you have so there's not as much turnover?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's essentially creating the best environment. You have your larger DSOs like Heartland and Aspen, but I think especially nowadays it's important to keep that culture up, and you want to have a family oriented practice, but also you want to have all of the resources that come with like working with a larger group.
Sure. And what does it look like direct motivation? Like how do you motivate the teams and, keep them from being burnt out?
Yeah, we definitely try to celebrate, small wins, obviously recognizing the effort that each team member is putting in. I think this is also huge where the practice manager comes into play, really motivating their teams, rewarding them for, reaching goals, definitely creating clear growth paths. We are very big on check-ins and, communication and, genuinely appreciating each team member goes a long way.
How many practices are you currently working with?
Currently I do have 8.
Okay. And do you find commonalities between the practices? Are there any like really unique stories right now where one practice is an outlier with certain issues?
I think I'm mostly out of Charlotte. I do think right now the Charlotte region is pretty hard as far as hiring. I think the Charlotte market is just very competitive. So that's kind of tricky out here in my Charlotte regions. Natural disasters, for example, I know that's kind of random, but I have a practice in Boone, and we just got hit by Hurricane Helene. So overcoming that was a new experience for everyone. I think that practice is showing, that we can be greatly devastated, but also come up. And they're doing amazing things right now.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You kind of have to roll with the punches whenever there's unexpected
Right.
things going on. And then how does that affect patient experience? Like how, I know you mentioned the KPIs that you have to hit, and obviously, you want to get high retention and keep bringing people in, but how do you not sacrifice the patient experience?
I definitely think just creating a great patient experience, not losing that touch. Obviously, with things like detrimental to the practice, production is huge. It is a business, we still have to kind of keep those KPIs up. But, taking pride in the scheduling, we want to make sure that we're working smarter, not harder. Sometimes we'll find openings in the schedule, poor handoffs, kind of breakthroughs in accountability. So even with solid systems, if the team isn't aligned or proactive, things kind of slip through the cracks. So I think essentially with a dental office, I've always said it kind of works like a domino effect. It really starts with the front desk and then it ends with the clinical team. So we just kind of have to have every role in a dental practice is very important.
Sure. And as far as getting production up, I mean, obviously, sometimes it makes a lot of sense to go after high value patients or procedures, but how do you kind of justify or keep patients that from hesitating on high ticket care?
Yeah. We really focus on optimizing their treatment plans, improving presentations, ensuring that hygiene is operating efficiently. We recently just started implementing a new analytical software called Dental Intel. I think it's great. We've had nothing but great things come out of that. And we've seen huge success with this. We also coach, our teams on patient communication and time management. So, the quality of care actually is improving, but also the performance is improving as well.
Sure. And new tools, I mean, with technology changing as much as it is, tools like Dental Intel seem to be making a huge impact. I mean, is it just financial decisions that you're able to make with that with Dental Intel, or like what sort of other information is beneficial from that tool specifically?
I think something that we've really focused us on is, bringing that production back to the schedule. There were times where, patients fell off, working unscheduled list. So patients that we haven't seen in the last 6 months, getting those back onto the schedule, and really just retaining all of those patients. Obviously we want to retain the patients that we're seeing, but also bring in new patients.
And as far as marketing goes, I mean, if you're working in Boone versus Charlotte, are there certain marketing tactics that work in one place than the other? Or do you have any specific examples of that?
Yeah, like you said, each office is different. So sometimes, blasting the same message across the board isn't really working. So really tailoring the marketing to each practice is super important. Like in Boone, we have a lot of the demographics is a little bit different. So something that works out there are like wellness flyers, like, getting those mailed out to each household. Those have been very impactful. Whereas my Charlotte practice, it's more of the digital marketing. The Google ads, the Instagram posts, the Facebook posts might not work as well in Boone like it would be Charlotte.
Sure. And is it specific marketing directors for each location, or do you have a marketing team within the whole group?
We have a marketing team within the whole group, and then the practice managers also have meetings with that marketing team monthly to ensure that their practice is doing well.
Sure. And is the group looking to acquire new practices and continuing to grow, under some of your supervision?
Yeah, I think right now, ideally we would love to grow. The whole goal is to grow, but we're really prioritizing depth right now. Expanding is exciting to see, but we want to really deepen the impact and ensure the quality and retention is there.
Sure. And what would be like one team member that you would clone between all the practices or skill sets? What would you look for in that team member? What position would that be?
Yeah, I would definitely, like I said, I think the patient experience is really important. So, someone that can really be confident and empathetic, and know how to guide the patients through the value of care, and often the difference between good and great production. Essentially, I want someone in there that's going to be able to let the patient know, educate them on the importance of the treatment that they need to have, but also knowing that there are KPIs and goals that there needs to be reached.
Sure. And as far as advice, like for you, starting off in your role as operator, and if you were looking back, what would what piece of advice would you tell yourself starting off to be able to handle the position as well as you are?
Yeah, definitely just kind of like you said, roll with the punches. I mean, dental is always evolving. There's always things changing. I think just making sure that you keep an open mind. There are going to be obstacles, especially with managing different practices, and each practice looks different. There are going to be different obstacles for each practice. So just kind of like you said, rolling with the punches and just leading by example, leading with communication, and holding everyone accountable.
Amazing. Well, thanks, Stephanie. Yeah, I appreciate your insight on your role there and everything you're doing. Is there anything you'd like to plug at the end here?
No, I've appreciated your time. I think this is super neat. I'm excited to see how it goes.